I'm once again by the coast here in North Wales, and you might even recognise that little pointy structure in the background there. That is the War Memorial here in Llandudno. And we're in Llandudno today because we're going to be visiting the Homefront Museum. So let's go take a look at some amazing wartime artefacts. So I'm here inside the Homefront Museum, and it's going to be a quick little tour through this museum. It's only a small one, but it is amazing. It really tells the story well of the home front, kind of going through that first section there of when the war breaks out to then life at home, really. So let's take a look at some of these amazing displays. Now, it wouldn't be one of my videos if it didn't feature at least one Spitfire in this section of the museum. Is kind of showing children's toys during the war. So you've got the wooden Spitfire then, and then also the mighty Churchill tank as well. So moving through the museum, you've then got a section based on the air raids, obviously, a big part of World War II at home, and then as you kind of go through the museum, directing you towards the air raid shelter, and looks like we've got an unexploded bomb. The amount of detail that is in the museum is amazing, not just in front of you and on the ground, but even up above. You know, you've got a Stuka diving down there, you know, watch out for the Hun in the sun, as they say. So it wouldn't be my channel again without any aircraft wreckage parts. So that part labelled G is actually a piece of Spitfire that was shot down over Kent during the Battle of Britain, which is an absolutely amazing artefact to have in such a small museum like this. Another amazing artefact, literally in the same cabinet as that Spitfire wreckage piece, is this mangled tyre, and that is the tyre from a Hawker Hurricane that was shot down during the Battle of Britain over Kent again. And reading the information pack said that the pilot wasn't found until 1980, where then he was buried with full military honours in Brookwood Cemetery in Surrey. So the Battle of Britain in full swing in this cabinet. And also what's really great in the museum is they have these little information boards that kind of describes what each label means, which is great. You know, you're not just stuck looking, oh, what's that? You know, they're all labelled. It's amazing. Well, blinking heck, we've just come around the corner and look at all these crashed aircraft parts, and these are from a range of aircraft, some from the Mosquito, Halifax, B-24. I won't go into all the details because then you don't have a reason to come to see this amazing museum, but an amazing thing for me to see is a proper aircraft nut. There's also a really great bunch of boards on the walls throughout this museum, and this one is actually about the gunnery school, which I covered in a previous video, which is amazing to see. And as well, also what was done in terms of defences here in Llandudno, because we didn't know where or when invasion was going to happen. So you've got a picture of some dragon's teeth there, and some of you might recognise that monument as well as the War Memorial along the front from the intro of this video. So yeah, and they're all really detailed, these boards. It's an amazing little museum. I think the most important part of this whole museum is this little display here with a telly going around with people's names, and as it says there, you know, it's remembering the young men of Llandudno who died during the Second World War. And you know, as cool as it is to see the artefacts from the time, it's about the sacrifice of the men who were from this area, who gave their life to give us our freedom, and that's the most important thing that I certainly take from this museum. I'm here actually with the owner of the Homefront Museum, Adrian, and he's very kindly allowed me to film in the museum today, which was amazing, so thank you very much for that, Adrian. And I just got a few questions. So how did you become interested in the history of the World Wars?
Well, it all really started for me with an incendiary bomb that landed on my grandparents' drive during the war. So they lived on the Wirral opposite Liverpool there, and in the May Blitz of 1941, hundreds of thousands of these dropped out of Goering's bombers, high explosive and incendiary. And this little thing landed on their drive, and Granny ran out with a bucket of sand, and she put it out, but then she used it as a doorstop. So when I was growing up, I used to play with it and sort of pick it up. What's that, Granny? It's a German bomb. And so it all started from there, really. Obviously, I had relatives who'd served. My grandfather was in the RAF and he was out in the Far East. My other grandfather was a reserved occupation. He was a railwayman, but he did his ARP bit, hanging around pubs, from what I can gather. And then my great-grandfather was in the Home Guard. He was on anti-aircraft guns around the Lever Brothers factory at Port Sunlight, quite famous. So they'd all done their bit, and they were sort of of that make-doing-men mentality, so they'd kept everything. And so, once I sort of showed some interest, other bits and pieces were pulled out. So that's really how it started. And as an 8-year-old, you're sort of, fascinated, aren't you?
Yeah.
With the stories and the items.
Absolutely. Oh, that's amazing. So then moving on from that, what was your inspiration for opening the museum?
Well, it sort of follows on from that, really. And, I just had an interest. And as a kid, I grew up in the 70s. You're able to pick this stuff up for next to nothing. You were given it. It was in people's lofts. Everyone had a gas mask or a tin hat. They knew my interest. They sort of gave it to me. So it was sort of one thing led to another. I didn't set out with the ambition of opening a museum, but sort of fell into it. I went to university, went to Australia for a year, came back. What am I going to do now? Well, I've got all this stuff. So I bought this building back in 99 and opened in 2000. So this year, end of last year was my 25th anniversary here.
Oh, amazing.
So,
amazing.
So yeah, that's how it all started, really.
Amazing.
And the building itself was a fire station during the war.
Oh, wow.
So it's sort of got that provenance as well, which I quite like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's got that actual historical tie.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. So this might be giving away some secrets, but how do you acquire artefacts for the museum?
Well, as I say, I collected the vast majority back in the 70s and 80s when no one wanted it. In more recent times, it's become harder to source anyway, and that's for two reasons. Number one, it's ended up in landfill. That generation has fallen away. It's no longer sort of in their houses. Those houses have been cleared. There's more collectors of, particularly home front. Going back 30 years, people were interested in American, German memorabilia, but less so in British, and certainly less so in home front. So it was relatively easy to pick up. Obviously, things have changed. It's become much more collectible. People bring things in. I've been open 25 years, and I've heard the same story over again. Oh, somebody will throw it away, or it's just sat in a drawer. You have it, sort of thing, which has been nice. Just usual places, auction, online auction. You can strike it lucky at antiques fairs.
Yeah. What, in your opinion, is the most interesting wartime fact or story from Llandudno that might have stuck in your brain, and that you've researched it maybe years ago, but you always think back to it?
I suppose one of the most interesting tales. Llandudno was such an interesting place during both First and Second World Wars. But I think the one that always amazes people when I tell them is of the 3 German officers who escaped the prisoner of war camp up at Llansannan. Basically, in a sort of Tom and Jerry fashion, bent the bars open, stepped out and walked the 20 miles here. And then rendezvoused with a German U-boat off the Great Orme, except for the fact that there was this little bit of limestone rock that made them not be able to see each other. And so for 3 days, these Germans waited up there, and 3 days the submarine waited out in the Irish Sea. And, had it not just been for that little buttress of rock, they'd have seen each other. And it amazes me that this happened here in Llandudno, but more so that it's never been turned into a film. Because wouldn't you think that, if this had happened anywhere else in the UK or certainly in America, this would have been, it's Llandudno's great escape. Yes. And then the sort of backstory to that is that, the Germans were cold, dejected. It was summer in Wales, so it's bound to be, isn't it? Yeah. And they came into Llandudno, and 2 spoke very little English. But one, was quite, was a very good English speaker. And I hate to say it, but I just get the impression he was a little bit cocky with that. And he decided to sit in a cafe and drink coffee and eat cake. But the thing that he hadn't sort of computed was that people around here speak Welsh as well. And so, people were suspicious of this, gentleman who had a slightly strange accent. And of course, the cafe owner saying to his waitress, go and get the police, but saying it in Welsh, so he didn't understand.
Yeah.
As soon as he steps outside, he's arrested. But then the story doesn't end there, because he was arrested by the civilian police. He ends up banged up in a police cell, and not Happy Bunny, because he's obviously a German officer and expects better. The two who spoke no English, they were taken to the what they describe as the colonel, but of one of the battalions of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers that was at the St George's Hotel. But because they were in military custody and because they were officers, they were basically treated completely different. They know there's cigars, there's a brandy, sir, and so the difference between the two. So maybe it says something about the overconfidence of officer number one.
Absolutely, yes. So then turning back to the museum, what do you think is the artefact or item in the museum that has the most impact when people say it kind of stops them?
Yeah, this is really interesting, because there's thousands of items here, and obviously for everyone it's going to be something different. But I think it is probably the board near the end that has the statistics from the war on, because I think then that really brings home to people 400,000 British soldiers killed, 70,000 civilians, and then the statistic at the end, 70 million people killed worldwide, somewhere between 60 and 80 million. Nobody's ever been able to establish the exact number. Yeah. So I would suggest that even though there's lots and lots of different items, artefacts in here, that is the one thing that people, I think, sort of, opens their eyes to, what went on 80 years ago.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of what I think makes people stop.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think that's what I try to get across is, it's nice to see historical items, but it's the wider context to put it in. That's the reason why, we do things like this, to keep it going.
But only that, those 60 to 80 million, each one had a story.
Absolutely.
And, and we can't forget that. And, I think that's really important, to tell people stories. And, they were just like us. Yeah. They didn't want to necessarily be there fighting or in the midst of as civilians just being caught in the crossfire. They didn't want to be there, did they?
No.
Nobody does. No. But I think, it's important that we remember them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's an amazing note to end on. So thank you once again, Adrian. It's been amazing to visit this little museum here in Llandudno. So there we have it, a nice little look around the Homefront Museum. Now, I didn't show absolutely everything that was there. That defeats the purpose of a museum. And then you couldn't experience it for yourself. And I encourage anyone to come to North Wales, the beautiful coast here in North Wales, to visit the Homefront Museum. And if not just for the artefacts, but also to meet Adrian as well. He's a lovely, lovely man. Very, very knowledgeable about the First and Second World War, and obviously this area in particular. So yes, I highly recommend visiting the Homefront Museum. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to check out the last video that I did, which was visiting more Commonwealth graves, you can check that out here. And don't forget to like and subscribe as always. Thank you once again. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.